and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. It is a delight that I get to show you how to make a very beautiful, easy beginner scarf. This modern color block scarf is made using some beautiful colors of the new yarn by Red Heart called Amore. This yarn is incredibly soft to the touch, and it has this beautiful drape. It comes in gorgeous, dusty, soft colors that you just can't go wrong with. And all of the color block sections, combining these colors together, really give this a modern and trendy look. So those of you out there who are true beginners and you're interested in making your first scarf and throwing in some good color work, I have got the video for you. I will not only show you how to make the scarf, but I'm going to give you some really good tips to make sure that the edges of your scarf are nice and even. This is a free pattern available over at redheart.com. You can find a link to the pattern in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say, to let other people know you enjoyed this video. Now, go ahead, get your pattern, gather your materials, join me back here, and I'll show you how to make this modern color block scarf. Are you ready to jump in and make your first scarf? Let's do this. We are going to begin right down here at this edge of the scarf. You'll notice in the pattern that it has 5 different colors. This is color A in the example that we're looking at, color B, color C, color D, color E. We are going to begin down here, and we're actually going to be using the color Chai for our example today, and then I will transition to this color to show you how to do color work, which is called Earl Grey. When you begin, let's go ahead and move this scarf out of the way, and let's start. This is a ball of yarn. You can pull yarn from the center, but you will get a nice amount of like guts coming out. So I suggest go ahead taking that ball band off and just grabbing the yarn from the outside of the ball, okay? This will have your ball roll around a little bit, but it'll be okay. You don't have to deal with any yarn guts coming out. We will begin with a slip knot. Place the yarn in the palm of your hand. Take the working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and middle finger, and when you come back up, cross over. Rotate your hand over. Go underneath the first loop and grab the second loop and off. I hope you can see that. I know it's sort of my flesh color, but this is the only part that it's like up against my skin. So hopefully you can see how that slip knot is made. Once you have the slip knot, you'll notice I left a nice long tail. It's always easier to weave in your ends if you have a nice long tail. Once you have the slip knot on your needle, we will then go ahead and make 24 chains. So you will wrap your yarn around the hook and then pull that hook through the loop that you had on there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so on. Once you have 24 chains, it should look a little something like this. Now we will go ahead and double crochet in the 3rd chain from hook. So you never count the loop on your hook. So we will count 1, 2, 3. So there's my 3rd chain. I will yarn over my hook and go into that 3rd chain from my hook. Yarn over, pull up. So I have 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over, draw through 2. That just completed a double crochet. Now I will go ahead and I will double crochet into each chain all the way to the end of this row. And at the end, I'll have 23 double crochets. And you might be saying, how am I going to get 23? Well, this initial chains right there that we skipped, that actually counts as a double crochet, okay? So I'm going to double crochet all the way down this row. Don't forget to place a double crochet in the very last chain, okay? You want to make sure you get that double crochet there. And once it's all done, as I said, you have 23 double crochets. And this initial skip chains right here, those count as a double crochet. Now, this is the part where I'm going to show you how to really keep those side edges nice and clean. So pay attention. We start off by turning our work, and we will chain 2 stitches. Now you'll notice in the notes section of this pattern, it says that these initial chain 2s count as a double crochet. Traditionally, it's a chain 3, but the designer decided to make it a chain 2, which is totally cool. Now that we know that it's a double crochet, we can treat it as such. What I want you to do is take a removable stitch marker, and in the loop behind the loop that's on your hook, so in that second chain you created, I want you to place your stitch marker in that chain. Can you see that? It's in the chain behind the one on my hook. The reason I'm putting that there is when I come back down my row and I come to that stitch marker is going to let me know that that is the last stitch of my row. And as I work along in continuing rows, I'll continue to move that stitch marker up so that way I am sure that I am always in the last stitch of the row. We'll also add one down here when we get to the end down here. So by the end, we'll have 2 stitch markers going. We'll also add one to this end of our work. So as you're working along, you'll have a stitch marker at either end. So that way you'll always be able to keep your ends nice and clean. Once you've added that stitch marker, you want to make sure you do not work into that first space right there. Okay, you see that? See that space right there? We do not want to work into that because this chain 2 counts as the double crochet that would be in that space. So you would yarn over your hook, go into the next stitch over. Okay, so that one right there. I'm going into the full stitch. Notice I'm not just going into the back, so I'm not going just into the back loop. I'm not just going into the front loop. I want to go into the full stitch, so I go into both loops, okay? Yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. And I will continue down this row working through each stitch and creating a double crochet. And as I'm going along for this row, I'm going to keep count. And when I get to my 23rd double crochet, remember this one counts as one, I will be in those turning chains that I skipped at the start of the last row. Here I am to the end of my row, and you might be like, okay, where's my last stitch? You'll notice that these turning chains right there, can you see them? There's a chain right there. That's where I'm going to place my double crochet. It's into an actual chain. It's one of the ones that we skipped at the start. And that is the end of my row, okay? Congratulations, you made it through row 2. Let's go ahead and begin row 3, and I will show you how to use a stitch marker on this side of your scarf. We will begin by turning our work, and we work a chain 2, just like we did before. We will do this throughout the entire pattern. And we'll take another stitch marker, place it into the chain that's behind the loop on my hook. See how it's right there? Now, when I come back to this end, I'll note that that's the last stitch of my row. I go ahead and continue on by working double crochets all the way down this row. But remember, you do not want to place a double crochet into that first stitch there. Otherwise, you will get increases. We don't want that. So we go to the next stitch over, and we will work our double crochet. For you beginners, I want to make sure you know that it is not always the case that the first stitch of the row counts as a stitch. So you always need to make sure you're reading your pattern to find out if the first turning chains, those chains there, if those are counted as a stitch or not. If they are counted as a stitch, you do not work into that first stitch there, okay, because those chains count as the stitch that would be placed there. If it is not counted as a stitch, you will work into those first chains, okay? So it's very important that you always read a pattern, especially the notes section, because that's typically where the designer will give you a heads up of anything that is important for you to know in the pattern. All right, I'm coming up to the end of my row, and for many people, this is where they make a mistake. They could put that stitch there and they're like, oh, it looks like I'm done. But because we've already marked where that stitch is, we know that this is our last stitch of the row. Now, one thing I want to make sure you do is when you complete a double crochet into that stitch, I do not want you to put it into that big space, okay? See how that's just going into a space? What that will do is leave a big hole in your work. I literally want you to put your hook through the chain, okay, through that second chain, just like you did your foundation chains. Once you do that, go ahead and continue on and complete the double crochet. See how that is? And then you have a nice clean edge. You can remove this marker because we're going to move it up, okay? So when we do the next chain 2, we will place our marker right there. Now, here is the point in the pattern that it's time for you to change colors. So let's learn how to do that now. The first thing I want you to do is cut your yarn, leaving at least 6 inches. You want to make sure you have enough yarn to weave in, okay? So I cut my yarn, leaving 6 inches. Grab the next color that you want to work with. For this one, I'm going to use the Earl Grey color here. And here's what we want to do. This last stitch we completed, I'm going to back out just one section. So if I take my hook out and just pull out one loop, see how I have 2 loops there? So I'm going to put those 2 loops back on my hook. Okay, so it looks as if I have a partially completed double crochet there. That's exactly what I want. Now I have my tail. I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to take my new yarn. I'm going to hold it up against my working yarn right here, okay? So I have both of my tails here. Look, I'm leaving a nice long tail of my Earl Grey. And now I will yarn over with my new color and then pull that new color through the 2 loops on my hook. That leaves the stitch still in that really pretty chai color, but it gives me a new color on my hook ready to go for the next row. Now what I will do is I will turn my work, chain 2, I'm just going to ignore these tails, okay? So I chain 2, take my marker, put it into my second chain because I want to make sure I know where the end of my row is, right? And now I will carry on. Now there are some YouTubers out there that will tell you to go ahead and just crochet over top of your ends. I am here to tell you that is not good enough to secure your ends when you're doing a multitude of color work as you are in this particular scarf. It is very important that you weave in your ends and make sure they are put away and not just crocheted over top of. If you just crochet over top of them, they are going to pop out and you're going to get holes. So do not do that. Now we will carry on in pattern just like we've been doing. We will do a yarn over our hook to start off our double crochet. We will not place a double crochet in the first one. We'll go to the next one over and we will work double crochets all the way down the row. I am going to tell you one little thing that I do when I am doing color work like this. Having the ends just kind of hang out is totally fine, and you could just leave it that way. But I like to go ahead and just tie those ends together just to secure them. So I take the 2 ends and I like to just do an overhand tie. Really simple, and just kind of secure them in place, okay? Nothing more than that. That's all I do. I don't even make a knot. I just kind of like to tie them just to make sure they're in place, okay? I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to finish this row, and then I want to show you how to weave in those tails because it's such an important part of this scarf. Right now, you know how to do the stitch repeat, which is just double crochets. You know that the chain 2 counts as a first double crochet. You know how to add stitch markers to keep your edges clean. You know how to change colors. So the only thing left for you to know how to do or to learn how to do is how to weave in your ends. So I want to show you how to do that, and then you'll be ready to make your very first scarf. As I come up to the end here and place my double crochet in my last stitch, it occurred to me that I should probably show you how to finish off this work. I've gone ahead and I've cut my yarn, leaving a nice long tail. And when I'm done with the last stitch, I like to do one chain. So I would do a chain and then just pull that chain all the way through and give it a tug. I like the way that finishes off my work. So that's how you would finish off your scarf. Now let's learn how to weave in your tails. When I weave in tails, I love to use a bent tip tapestry needle. Can you see that? So these are bent tip tapestry needles. They are so helpful, and I just find it easier to get into my yarn when I use them. I'm taking one strand of yarn and I'm pinching it around the eye of the needle. And as I do that, it gives me a nice little nub right there, and I'm able just to wiggle that right into the eye of my needle. Pretty easy. Now I will take my needle here, and working through the same color of yarn, I am going to work down the actual post of a stitch. Okay, right here at the end, I'm going to work down that post. I'm going to come across underneath these stitches. And then I'm going to come back up the post, okay? So I'm just going through the post there. I'm going to go through the post here. And the reason I'm going through the post is because this yarn is a little bit different construction than a Super Saver yarn or even a Chic Sheep. And it has some really cool kind of chainettes going on. So as I make this square sort of reaction here, so I went down, across, back up, across, now I'm coming back down. I like to finish it off where it's just right here along the side, and I will make sure that I am going through the stitch. Okay, so it's nice and secure. Notice I haven't restricted any of the movement of the scarf, okay? And you can't see any extra strands going between stuff because I put them all into the post of the stitch. Once that's nice and secure, I can go ahead and snip it nice and close and get rid of that. Now I could go ahead and take the gray and do the same thing, only this time I would follow the gray. If you come to a point where maybe you're nearing the end of your yarn for whatever reason, and it's in the middle of your work, the best piece of advice I can give you is go ahead and undo your work till you're at the edge of the work, and then change to a new ball or change to a new color. Do your best to not do that in the middle of the work. I know it's a little bit hard because you're like, oh, I'm wasting all that yarn, but just trust me, it just makes a much more sophisticated and clean project look. All right, now you know how to make this really great modern color block scarf with some very traditional and easy skills that you'll be able to continue on in your future crochet projects. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you'll come back here for more knitting and crochet and crafting videos right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.